Everybody is complaining about the high cost of healthcare and how much insurance costs and how much tests cost and how much this costs and how much this. Welcome back to the show. Today we're going to talk about the AI revolution. And I'm going to specifically talk about it when it relates to healthcare because I was recently at a conference and what I saw just absolutely blew my mind at what's currently in development and that we're going to be seeing not in the next 10 years, but what we're going to be seeing in the coming months, in the coming years, that's just going to absolutely revolutionize, some of the way that healthcare is delivered and how some of these tests are really going to be heavily reliant on AI. And in my opinion, I think it's going to be a win-win. So let's get into it. One of the things that we saw that was pretty amazing was this idea of, people have to have colonoscopies and endoscopies, right? So, everybody wants to do one of these. And in preventative healthcare, that you have to be of age, for something like this to be tested. It can be very uncomfortable because generally speaking, what they're doing is they're sticking a camera either down your throat or up the other end, right? So you can use your imagination. And you have to think that this could be very uncomfortable. And also, there are some things that can go wrong if, this thing tears something inside, which is never a good thing. And I think that what they've come up to combat this was something pretty amazing. So this guy actually pulls out this video with a pill that has a camera on it, and he swallows it, right? We're watching this video. He's swallowing this pill that has a camera and it has some level of propulsion on it. I can't tell you the actual engineering to it, but what it actually did was pretty amazing. He pulls out his little PlayStation controller, or what it looks like a video game controller, and he's zipping around his GI tract, right? And this thing is in real time sending back images of this thing, going through the GI tract and the intestines. And then obviously it's going to come out the other end. But during that time, it's gathering massive amounts of data, just like you would do, say, in an endoscopy or a colonoscopy, but without having to, stuff this tube down your throat or, up the other end. And you're getting all this imagery and you're going back and forth and you're checking things out. And then in real time, what's happening is that the AI is just evaluating all the information. And by my recollection, I think this thing in real time is giving, the diagnosis and identifying those areas that should be concerned or concerning, right, to the doctor. And, not only are you doing something a little less invasive, but you're also getting all of this data collection that I think a regular person just evaluating everything could potentially miss. But this computer is just gathering all this data and putting it all in a nice package for you and giving this information, for the doctor to be able to read. And I'm assuming that it's probably going to make recommendations based on what it sees. But the idea is that, think about this. If you have the ability to do this even more frequently, because I think right now it's like at certain age categories that, you have a colonoscopy done and, it's recommended to do it every so often or a number of years. But think about that. 1 year is a long time. 5 years can be a long time. And the only other time that they may recommend you getting something like that is if they see something wrong or there's some kind of diagnosis because you're not feeling well. And think about all that time that goes by that you may not be able to, identify if something's really wrong with you. So this goes on into our further segment. So stay tuned and stay with us to really kind of talk about some of the other things that are coming up. But just to wrap this thing up, if you think about this, this is so easy to be able to walk in, pop a pill and think about the implications of, not having to do all of the prep or, wait a long time to go to a specific facility. What if your doctor could just actually do this in your office right when you're popping in? Or better yet, who knows what the future will hold? Maybe this thing comes in the mail and you pop it in and, it zips around and maybe it has its own propulsion or its own program on what it wants to look at. And then, all this information is available in real time and you don't have to wait and you can actually get a productive appointment so you don't have multiple appointments or multiple times. So, this was something crazy, but if you talk about the implications of this, imagine if you could have these more often. If you could do, like, let's say you had something wrong with your colon and you had cancer detection. It is said that if you have early detection, you have a 90% chance, right? With early detection. Again, I mean, there's all these circumstances, but if you detect something early and you know that something's wrong, you have a better chance of beating this thing. But if it's late detection, meaning caught after the fact and undiagnosed for a long period of time, I mean, that percentage, it's like 14%. So think about the differential there. You catch it early, you have a much better chance of survival than if you catch it late. So this concept of creating something that is easy to use, that's going to be able to, potentially save someone's life a lot earlier is, definitely going to be one of those things that you look at the AI revolution and go, this is really a good thing, especially when it comes to healthcare. I think that it's pretty common for people to find any reason not to go do something like this or do a test, or whether or not it's, approved by the insurance or there's a reason to do it. But if you had something that was this easy, and I'm sure it's relatively, low cost in comparison, potentially, but if you're able to do something more frequently, it's just going to be a better end result. And I think that's, definitely a good thing. So let's just talk about personalized medicine as it comes to AI. So, a lot of you probably own an Apple Watch, and this was another thing that we saw at the conference that was absolutely amazing, is that this concept of wearable devices that's consistently gathering data, right, on a day-to-day basis. So think about this. When you have something that's wrong or you're not feeling well, then you're going to the doctor and you're kind of telling him, at that point in time, he's taking a diagnosis, right, in that visit that is only going to be able to give him a snapshot of what's going on in your body at that very moment. So, if you walked up some stairs, maybe your blood pressure is elevated, maybe you had a lot of coffee that day, maybe you ate something that did or didn't agree with you, but it can throw off, all of the analysis that they're doing in that short period of time. They don't have the ability to be with you all the time, but that wearable device does. And if you think about what's going on and what they're tracking this data, of, oxygen levels, heartbeat. I mean, the way that, just whether or not you have enough water, or you dehydrated. I mean, it's absolutely crazy the amount of data that they can collect. But if you think about it logically, this information is being recorded in real time, like all the time, right? As long as you're wearing the device, and obviously it has to be charged, but it's gathering data in real time and things that you wouldn't see normally, right? There might be anomalies that happen that you're not even going to be able to be aware of because you don't even know what to look for. So I'll give you a prime example of this. I was telling a friend of mine who last year had been diagnosed with AFib, and AFib is, has to do with the heart. And the only time they can determine whether or not you have AFib is that you have to be in AFib. So if you just happen to have AFib and you go to the doctor and they catch it at that very moment, in that snapshot of time while you're in AFib, you're going to be able to be diagnosed that this needs to be dealt with. And it's a very dangerous thing. And it was very bad for him because he had gone to his primary care doctor in this moment because he wasn't feeling well. And they said, man, you're an AFib. You need to go to the cardiologist immediately. And he ended up having to have a procedure, which ultimately saved his life. So the crazy thing about this is he's telling me, as I'm talking about this conference about, wearables and iWatch and what the future is of how this is going to notify you when there's a problem. He goes, I didn't realize this. And I thought it was just an error, but my watch on occasion would warn me that I was in AFib. It actually gave him a warning in real time that he was going through AFib, and he just thought the watch was broken. And he didn't know what it was, so he didn't pay attention to it. But think about that. If they wouldn't have happened to catch it, or he didn't say, I didn't feel good enough and I needed to go in and get the doctor to take a look at me at that very moment, he could have had a much different outcome. And I think that when you really think about this story and know that, if he would have known, at the time that his watch was notifying him that he had AFib, he would have been more proactive, and this might not have been such a close call. So if we go beyond the clinic, if you think about this, like, having to go to the doctor, and as you think about how all of this is, being gathered, right, in this data set that belongs to you, and the computer is constantly processing data, right? The AI, the artificial intelligence, it's giving a roadmap, to what you potentially could be susceptible to, based on the data that it's gathering in real time. So if you think about that, if the doctor had the ability to be by your side, or with you when you sleep, to be able to watch you and, take diagnostics on you, all the time, they're going to have a much better picture of what your overall health looks like, or what you're going to be more prone to get. So maybe your heart, isn't as good as it should be, or maybe your lungs, whatever it is, whether you have too high cholesterol, whether you're dehydrated too often, whatever that health potential issue is. Think about it. If you were able to have that information constantly looked at, and know that you would have a better sense of your overall health and your well-being and where you are in that process, think about what that potential could be. Not only for you, but just people that are wearing the technology, and think about the overall implication of being able to reduce things on more of a proactive basis, right? In the beginning, as I said before, much better chance of survival if things are detected early. That's well stated, well documented, instead of after the fact. And that goes with cost too. Not to break this down to dollars and cents, but everybody is complaining about the high cost of healthcare, and how much insurance costs, and how much tests costs, and how much this costs, and how much this, if it's taking you out of, your day-to-day, or, all the intangible costs of you having to have a surgery, or having an episode where you have to go to the hospital. Think about all that. Think about if that could cut down even 10% or 50%, right? Or even 75%, because you knew what you were going to be susceptible to. And this thing would warn you ahead of time to make sure that you got this looked at. So I know this sounds crazy to even think about, but you'd be surprised how long they've been working on this. And I want to go back and tell a short little story about one of the carriers that flew us up to the Bay Area to show us their technology that was being evaluated at the time, to see how they could potentially utilize this wearable technology and do a better job of giving healthcare, to those that were, either their subscribers, or, they were insured by, or their patients. And it was amazing to think about, even 10 years ago, a decade ago, a lot of the things that I saw then were just something that was a concept, to where when I went and looked at what I saw at this conference, just the tip of the iceberg, just the camera pill, and the technology of early detection of, potential health issues with the wearable devices. Think about how far we've come, and think about what the implications of that would be for people that would have the ability to have information and be warned proactively that something's going on. So we always want to look at this, for what it is, and you always have to trust but verify. But I think that one of the most concerning things that we're all being faced with right now is, yes, the rising cost of healthcare, but also how unhealthy our culture is, and how many people are having more and more health issues. And being able to diagnose this in real time and catch things early is going to give society as a whole a much better chance of fighting chronic disease. So if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I always encourage you to subscribe. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this subject matter. Leave a comment so we can interact. And if you have time, rate the show. You can find us on YouTube at Hey Charles Biz. You can find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify at Hey Charles. We're Hey Charles 77 on Instagram and TikTok, and Charles Ernst on LinkedIn. See you next time.